Director of the Southern. Hi, everyone. I'm Carl Silverstein, Executive Director of the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy. We're so glad that you have joined us today for this webinar about a remarkable donation of land in the Roan to SHC that's going to be completed next year. This is a vast ecological treasure, and SHC receiving it is going to be a milestone for conservation in the mountains and for SHC as an organization. So we're thrilled to share more information with you today. Jay Lutze is going to speak about the significance of this property in the Southern Appalachian landscape, and then partnerships over the last 15 years or so for the study and research of this location, and then cumulative land acquisitions, which are bringing us to this time of this gift to SHC. And then I'll speak with you about some of the implications of the gift of land for SHC as an organization. And that'll include steps we're taking to receive the land, and then impacts on our budget and capacity and staffing, and kind of beginnings of our plans on how we can share this property with the community, and then implement our goals regarding equity. Marquette Crockett is going to speak as SHC's Roan Stewardship Director, and she'll reflect on how, as a biologist, this gift of land impacts her personally, and just some of her personal reflections. We'll save time at the end for Q&A, and Christy Urquhart, SHC's Associate Director, is going to help with streaming those questions. And so please type your questions, any comments, into the Q&A or the chat. So now I'm happy to introduce Jay Lutze. Jay is an award-winning author, a nationally recognized advocate on behalf of conservation, former SHC board member and chair of our board, and now Jay serves as senior advisor to the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy Board. So thank you, Jay, for being with us today.
Thanks, Carl. This is exciting. If we may have people that have tuned in from New Zealand or India or any of the other number of places where this story reached through the media. It's very exciting, the reach of the press pieces that went out. It started as a local story at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then the AP picked up the story, and the International Wire picked up the story. And the story looks like this. SAHC agreed to accept a generous donation of land from Tim Sweeney, who is the founder and creator of Epic Games. And Tim is a friend of SAHC's, and we'll detail what that friendship looks like here as we go forward, and want to make you, I guess if people in New Zealand and India have followed the story, we really want to talk mostly to our best friends who are closest to us, and those who have been following our work for a long time, those who have invested in land conservation in our region, in our landscape, in our focus areas, and those who keep our staff fed and keep our lights on. So thanks to everybody that showed up today to learn more about this gift. First question we often get asked is, where is this gift of land? So here's a map to start orienting us in the world where we're talking about, what we're looking at. That green star represents roughly where the donation of land is. We're in Avery and Mitchell counties. You can barely see on this map, the county line is a very faint gray line. The lines that are darker are the Over Mountain Victory National Historic Trail, and in yellow, the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. More familiar to all of us as the AT, the Appalachian Trail. Then this is Highway 19E. Here's Elk Park up here going south, and then Spruce Pine is down here. So that's kind of where we are. A little bit more detail. You can barely see on this map, but there's a faint green color on much of this map. That is the proclamation boundary of Pisgah National Forest. So all the land that we'll talk about today is inside the planning boundary or proclamation boundary for Pisgah National Forest. So it already ranks as really important land that was in private hands, has been in private hands for a very long time, and eligible to be added to Pisgah National Forest. But we're coming up with a different way to protect this important place, largely because Pisgah National Forest and the National Forests public land units across the country are woefully underfunded, and there's simply not enough money to add lands like we're talking about today to the federal estate. So there are lots of different ways to protect land, and we'll talk about some of them. This is a looking at the map that I just showed you in a slightly different way. This shows parcel boundaries for places that are protected in the Roan Highlands landscape. Right now, we're calling the gift of land, which is represented in yellow, South Yellow Mountain Preserve. And a lot of you are very familiar with this east-west corridor up here, which is federal land, the Appalachian Trail corridor, or the Roan proper, we sometimes call it, starting out here at Roan High Bluff, many of you are familiar with, and then the Carver's Gap vicinity, then Yellow Mountain Gap, where the Overmountain Trail and the Appalachian Trail cross. So that's a little orientation. We're going to talk a lot about this land down here in the south. We're going to look at this ridge line here, which is called Bailey Meadows. We're going to talk about this area here, which is the Pyatt and Jones Creek drainage, and this feature here called Raven Cliffs, and this connection in the Cane Creek Mountains between Grassy Ridge and Spear Tops down to Big Bald Yellow Mountain Raven Cliffs. So this is another way of looking at the landscape. A lot of you have stood on the platform at the rhododendron gardens and looked east. And a lot of us did not know for a very long time that we were looking at a lot of private land out here. This entire range was owned by about 44 different landowners. And this represents the gift of land that Tim Sweeney is making to SAHC. Again, the features, Big Bald Yellow Mountain Raven Cliffs, represented by this high ground here, which is 5,300 feet in elevation, and then High Knob, Bailey Meadows, I pointed out to you on that yellow blotch on the prior map. So ground that's very familiar to all of us who love the Roan Highlands, but also a revelation to a lot of people that a lot of that was in private hands. Another vantage point for looking at donated lands. This is from the Appalachian Trail on Round Bald, looking across some beautiful flame azaleas about this time of year. I took this picture probably 10 years ago, and just demonstrating there how visible the donated lands are from places that we all treasure. Yet another view, this is taken from Big Yellow Mountain. A lot of you have been on Big Yellow Mountain, owned by the Nature Conservancy, managed by SAHC and the Nature Conservancy together for many years, since 1974, as a matter of fact. And these are the Tim Sweeney donation lands looking due south. That is the Raven Cliffs, Big Bald Yellow Mountain summit there. Spear Tops is land that SAHC acquired and then conveyed to the state of North Carolina as part of the Yellow Mountain State Natural Area, as well as these lands on Little Yellow Mountain purchased by SAHC and the Nature Conservancy in multiple different transactions and then conveyed out to the state of North Carolina. So you can see they're kind of bookends between state ownership down here to the south at Spear Tops, and then on the other side of this ridge line, White Oak Creek, some other parcels we have conveyed out to the state of North Carolina. So a real mix here between private land, state land, federal land, and land that SAHC owns. Let's take a quick trip through history and see how we got to this point. SAHC started our work in the Roan as part of a committee, the Roan Mountain Preservation Committee of the Appalachian Trail Conference at the time, now Appalachian Trail Conservancy. And the method was to try to fill in a line represented by the 4,000 foot elevation gradient. Here, the Appalachian Trail was extended out onto Hump Mountain after our 1981 purchase and conveyance to the Forest Service, after many, many years of negotiation with Oscar Julian's family. And so that's that east-west sort of layout that we've talked about here of federal lands. And if you go forward in time, this is 1966. This is 1984. You can see how much work was accomplished with state and, in this case, federal partners mostly, although you can see Roan Mountain State Park appearing on the map by 1984. And this is Big Yellow Mountain, where one of those images was taken. This is the Big Yellow Mountain Preserve here, and you see the 4,000-foot contour again. You can see not a lot of protection happening here to the south, but it's noted already on this map that that 4,000-foot contour heads to the south. And so we might find some of the species that we find at Roan High Knob and Roan High Bluff at the similar elevations just farther south. This is moving forward in time again to 1994. SHC's Hampton Creek Cove project appears here, 690 acres there on the Tennessee side of the line, again in Cherokee National Forest, but now managed by the state of Tennessee and SAHC. You're starting to see a little bit of land protection happen here on Grassy Ridge, thank goodness, by 1994. And some of these tracks next to Big Yellow Mountain that joined that preserve, SHC had acquired by this time. Moving forward, more land protection happening here on Big Yellow Mountain, a little bit more land filling out here on Grassy Ridge. This Flint tract was an important acquisition by SAHC. And we were using state dollars for this purchase for the Flint tract. For example, we were using funds from the Natural Heritage Trust Fund and the Clean Water Management Trust Fund, which is now known as the Land and Water Fund, and also sprinkling in some federal dollars from the stateside portion of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. This is the same map. We're now having to zoom out more. We're doing so much land protection. There's a slightly different look. We're doing some conservation easements in the landscape here. We're working with the state here on the Atria tracts, as they're known. There's the Cranberry Iron Mine site, and there's some important work there that's happened recently with this same donor. Tim Sweeney has acquired that land. So why is it important that we're doing all this land in a Forest Service proclamation boundary using state and private dollars? Well, this shows how fragmented Pisgah National Forest is. It's the second most visited national forest in the country, but look at all the white private land interspersed. This is in Cherokee National Forest on the Tennessee side of the line, but our national forests are not finished. They are works in progress, and we are working as hard as anyone to try to fill in holes. This is the Asheville watershed over here. These are craggy mountains. We hold a very large conservation easement here that joins Mount Mitchell State Park. There are lots of different ways of protecting land in the landscape, but the federal ownership that people rely on, this whole is Grassy Ridge when this map was created. And so you can see that's not federal land. It's not going to be federal land. It is owned by the state of North Carolina now, what we protected there in 2012. And the landscape we're talking about is all this down here, eligible to be part of Pisgah National Forest, but we're protecting it using other resources. 1999, our work really changed when Tom Kenny's Conservation Site Design Report was published. And SHC, Judy Murray played a large role in this, Jamie Donaldson, Alan Weekly, people whose names we all know, and the Nature Conservancy and the Cannon Foundation funded this report. And it notes that Yellow Mountain and the Cane Creek and Raven Cliffs and Big Bald south of Grassy Ridge and Little Yellow Mountain are significant for landscape site inclusion at a later time. So we're leaping forward, and now is that later time. And other resources that we were participating in creating, working with the state of North Carolina, creating this inventory of the significant natural areas of Avery County. The state spent a lot of time and a lot of resources in developing these county inventory so we would know what's on the ground, so we would know where we could be most effective in adding conservation value to the base of conserved lands in the state. And great people worked on this report, and when you dig into it, you see tables and maps, and you see lists, and a featured site here. If you see number 6 under Roan Mountain and vicinity is the Yellow Mountain Raven Cliffs area. So in 2006, Peter Smith was building on the work of Tom Kenny and the botanists who had been in the field, and you start seeing this important area to the south of the Roan proper being noted as critical for protection. So Now that we know there are all these great natural features in the landscape, what do we do? Well, SAHC worked closely with the Division of Parks and Recreation, our state parks division, and launched an ambition to create a new state natural area. And so that required legislation, and our team worked hard with legislators, local legislators, to get a bill proposed in 2007. It passed the legislature in 2008. This is the bill. It notes the unique archaeological, geological, biological, scenic, and recreation resources, and it gets more specific, and it creates two new state natural areas, one at Bear Paw, which is also called Hanging Rock near Grandfather Mountain in Avery County, and this Yellow Mountain State Natural Area, which has sort of a broad planning boundary heading south from Grassy Ridge. So state, simultaneous with creation of the state natural area, the state is working harder than ever to compile and complete data sets that show us where to work. And this is a map. This is the same landscape we've been looking at. And what you can see in yellow are agricultural openings, fields for the most part. What you see in red is hardened surfaces. What you see in pure green is nice forested land, great conservation opportunities. And we started laying data on top of this map to guide our work. This is Roan High Bluff out here. You're familiar with this east-west map. This is that southern spur going south, and look at how much good forest cover there is all the way down to spruce pine. And we'll be looking at this spot in particular. This is right out of the 2006 county inventory that Peter Smith conducted from site visits that he and Alan Weekly and Mike Shafley and other botanists conducted on this site when they got landowner permission. Using GIS, we start laying different data sets on top of each other to help us guide our work. And it becomes very clear that the Roan is nationally significant. These are globally imperiled forest communities, grassy balls and spruce fir forests. But you also start to see exactly what we suspected, that these ridge lines coming off to the south are really important. And at this point, we don't know quite how important, because all of it's in private ownership, and we haven't been able to do all the inventory work that we will continue to do into the future. But you can already see with the little data that we have how important this area is, and also how if we can link the ridges, we might have a really important corridor. There's not a single road crossing the Cane Creeks in this landscape from Grassy Ridge to the south. So it really stood out as a conservation opportunity. We start throwing bird data on top of this and element occurrences, and the bright yellow is important bird areas. Not surprisingly, really important. These are places where birds are frequenting, and so our conservation interest continues to rise. Well, who owns it? A lot of private landowners. This is an analysis we did working with the state and working with Andy Carroll and a grant from the Open Space Institute to analyze this landscape. Are there opportunities to do good conservation here, or is it all broken up into golf resorts and small parcels like we see right here? This is a neighborhood, Rebwin Mountain. Really hard to do meaningful conservation there, but maybe we can get linkages there by buying some of these lots. And this was a project designed to guide our work. And where should we work hardest on acquisition? Where should we maybe reach out to landowners and ask if they want to do their own conservation, maybe donate conservation easements or sell conservation easements? For orientation, this is that Flint tract that we talked about earlier. And this is Grassy Ridge. This is the J.K. Stewart tract. Wasn't protected when this map was made, but it was soon thereafter. So this is great guidance that the science gave us. We broke all those parcels out, we ranked them, and what's in green is all that great Forest Service ownership in the Appalachian Trail corridor. This is the Grassy Ridge tract, the J.K. Stewart tract that many of you are familiar with, that we purchased in 2012 finally. And then we ranked every parcel down this corridor, and you can see the red is the highest priority. And that's kind of represented by one of those early maps we showed where all this donated land is. Those are critical parcels. This is the Jones and Pyatt Creek vicinity right here. We followed the science, and it told us where to work. We purchased out of economic distress, and the the fallout from the communities at Penland debacle, where there were a lot of legal issues at play and a lot of people went to jail and there were tracts tied up in foreclosure, SAHC moved aggressively in 2009, 2010 to purchase this Molly's Branch tract, the White Oak Creek tract. We've already talked about the Flint tract that you've seen on the map. These became bookends for the large landscape planning that we were doing with the state of North Carolina, with the Division of Parks and Recreation. In 2010, a Spanish wind farm company sought to locate North Carolina's first and only industrial wind farm in the center of the Yellow Mountain State Natural Area Planning Zone, straight out Bailey Meadows, which I pointed out on that first slide, the long ridge in the south. These were going to be very large turbines, 3.5 times as large, as tall as Sugar Top. What does that look like from the viewing platform in the rhododendron gardens? Looks like a big industrial wind farm. And some people find turbines elegant when they're running. What's not elegant is building an 80-foot wide road in the middle of a state natural area that the legislature has set aside because of its important natural features. And then digging into the mountain an 8-story building to hold up a 350-foot tall turbine in an important bird area. There were all kinds of reasons why this was a bad place to test out industrial wind farm activity. And so we worked with legislators who thought this was a bad idea and thought that the Mountain Ridge Protection Act is a good idea. And that proposal went away. All the while, the Natural Heritage Program was out in the landscape, further documenting the importance of the area. This is on a winter's day, and in 2012, I got an email that said that a private buyer had purchased the top of Yellow Mountain and coming to the edge of Raven Cliffs, and I was very worried. It was Tim Sweeney, who bought 900 acres on the east face of Yellow Mountain, including the headwaters of Jones and Piatt Creek, 5,300 foot in elevations at the top. Believe what I say, not what I wrote. It's 5,300, not 5,500. But that's where Tim purchased his 900 acres. And Linda Pearsall from the Natural Heritage Program put me in touch with Tim, knowing how active SAHC had been in working in this landscape with our state partners, and my level of concern and Carl's level of concern, Christie's level of concern. And so we reached out to Tim Sweeney and we had a great conversation. We owned land joining this that we had purchased out of the communities of Penland debacle. And Tim was fantastic from the very beginning. He said, my goal is conservation. I want to work with you, not against you. I will not set high comps in the landscape. I will bargain hard where there are willing sellers. I want to protect this important corridor that's noted from the Natural Heritage Program in the 2006 inventory. And so he had a team engaged, and we all started working very well together. So again, on the map, this is the 900 acres, the Williams tract, we called it, going up to the summit of Yellow Mountain, Big Bald, and then Raven Cliffs is right over here. And to successfully protect the whole landscape, Tim needed not just to work with us on these 900 acres, we all needed to work together on the Cambron and Matheson tracts. And then this was the range where the wind turbines were slated to go. And Tim had a radical idea. I wanted to work with legislators and maybe strengthen the Mountain Ridge Protection Act. Tim's idea was to purchase the Bailey Meadows tract and protect it that way. So there are always more than one way to meet your objectives. So this is Tim in the middle there with David Ray, who was working with Open Space Institute. David had been with Open Space Institute and the Nature Conservancy and SAHC. And we're looking at hard copies of maps the way we used to in the old days, roll them out on the dining room table and let's get strategic. This is Mike Leonard from the Conservation Fund, great friend of Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy and all conservation in the state and beyond. And we're pulling out maps, trying to figure out what's feasible, what can we do together. And this is what it looked like when you purchase 44 separate parcels of land in a landscape and tie them all together with very few inholdings. These are the state lands that SAHC conveyed to the state of North Carolina. So those are managed as part of a state natural area. But as you've seen, there's a lot of land owned by other entities inside state natural areas, oftentimes. And this is one of those cases where SHC will own and manage this land. We will do it in consultation with our partners at the state of North Carolina. We treasure their input, their partnership, their data that they create for us. Their objective in seeing this declared a state natural area was to have it protected, and that is what we will do. This connection exists now. It's tenuous, parcel by parcel. We're linking these areas together as a meaningful wildlife corridor. There are 100 miles of mapped water on the donated lands, and that's represented in this map here. And just to revisit the map we started with again, to sort of the scale of a gift of this size, it fits in really nicely with state lands, private lands that SHC already owns, other lands we've conveyed to the state, these federal lands here, and hopefully private lands in the vicinity where people will benefit from living and farming and raising cattle in the vicinity of all this protected land. It should be a benefit to the entire community and entire vicinity, and that's what we hope. And I'll pass this to Carl now.
Thank you, Jay. That is just a great summary of the significance of this large tract of land, and then the kind of the history that's sort of leading up to now when SHC will receive the property. And so thanks for that, Jay. I am going to just take a minute to share with you sort of the implications for our organization of receiving a gift of this magnitude. And so just want to start with kind of what our internal process is to be able to receive the gift. And every land acquisition we do gets reviewed by our land protection committee and voted on by our board. And that process is happening now. And we anticipate those meetings really kind of winding up in September, and our board having a fall board retreat in which we're going to specifically have workshops about the future of this property within SHC, and then we'll have the board approval at that. The property is being surveyed right now. We have a series of due diligence steps that we undertake for every acquisition we do. The property is being surveyed now, and that is a 33-mile boundary. So it'll take months to complete the survey. You saw that it's in multiple parcels. I think there were maybe 48 parcels. And so it's desirable for that number to get reduced. And so where possible, we're recombining parcels. Not sure that it'll all be in one unit, but it'll definitely be fewer parcels than it is now. We're doing a title review for all those parcels. We'll get title insurance. So just like every land transaction we do, we look at the details with the fine-tooth comb and make sure that that we are receiving an asset that we'll be able to guarantee will be conserved in perpetuity. There's environmental due diligence. We'll have consultants do a phase 1 environmental report. We are going to be doing mapping of the existing trails on the property, ATV use paths. We'll probably be getting the property appraised to document the value that's being received. So those are some of the steps we're taking right now, and we foresee next spring is the time when the land will actually transfer to SHC. And so the questions many people have asked us about impacts on our budget, our staffing capacity. And so Tim Sweeney has, he'd like for SHC to be able to hold this property if we want to forever, and for us to have the capacity to do that. We'll also have the flexibility after a period of time, 40 years, to make decisions about the future of the property. But so he's going to make a gift to us for a long-term fund, like an endowment that we can use to pay annual expenses around managing the property. And then we will add staffing as a preserve manager. Some of you have asked if, if this owning this asset will take our eyes off of other long-term obligations and responsibilities that SHC has. And so the answer is that Tim Sweeney is helping us ensure that we have the capacity to be a responsible manager of this preserve, in addition to the other work that SHC does. So after the land transfers to us next spring, we really in earnest then undertake the process of creating a management plan for long-term management of the property, and then how best to share the property with people and the community. And so that management plan creation will be a thoughtful process will involve stakeholders like our partners at the state and others in biology and land management, so that we can assure that the most fragile aspects of that property won't be endangered, and that we can make sure they're protected forever, and that in some capacity we can welcome people to go for a hike, maybe go camping, have educational opportunities with schools in Mitchell and Avery counties. And all of this process will be careful and thoughtful, and involve multiple parties and agencies. And it really does happen after we receive the land next spring. Another factor in our planning is that we want to make sure that our ownership and use of this preserve advances SHC's goals with respect to equity and inclusion for the local community. We want to lift up stories of people in the community who owned land in this vicinity before, including people of color in the landscape. And so also current stories of people in the community. So those are some of our priorities. And please stay tuned, because this will be an evolving story over the months to come. I want to introduce Marquette Crockett, SHC's Roan Stewardship Director. Before Marquette joined the SHC staff in 2014, she served for 10 years as a wildlife biologist with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Fish and Wildlife Service, and she managed high elevation habitat, spruce fir forest, wetlands at the Canaan Valley National Wildlife Refuge in West Virginia. So Marquette brings a special kind of professional history in large-scale preserve management that I think makes her especially well suited to reflect on the significance of this property and SHC's future management of it. So Marquette, want to introduce you for a moment.
Thank you, Carl. I apologize to everyone for not having a camera. I actually don't have a camera on this computer this morning, but I do have sort of the pleasure of getting to just show you guys a fun slideshow of some photos of the property and also of the species that we expect to see on the property. And particularly pleased to do that because very often when we announce these big land protection projects, immediately the questions focus on how are we going to use this? What does this mean to me? Can I recreate? Can I, extract? And so it's very nice for me to be able to sort of step back for once from those questions and put on my biology curmudgeon hat and just really focus on the ecological importance of this property and I can't stress enough that this conservation project is significant on a global scale, and it's going to significantly contribute to the conservation of federally listed species and other rare species. So it's just huge. So let me see if I can start this slideshow. There we go. And I'm just going to let these photos run while I talk. But the first few photos just show exactly what Jay had already mentioned. One of the big reasons this property is so ecologically important is that it's vast and it's unbroken by any roads. And that's not to say there's not soil roads and wagon roads, but for the most part, it's unbroken. It's also incredibly diverse in its elevation, its slope, its aspect. And because of that, it makes the property climate resilient, and it also makes the property incredibly diverse in the amount of habitat that it conserves. And thirdly, as Jay mentioned, again, it's connected to large protected landscapes, including Yellow Mountain and those properties protected by SHC. And because of those connections, it feeds into the bigger landscape. So you guys have just been seeing some photos of Jones and Pyatt Creek, which flow into the Tow River. So if you fish or swim or recreate in that river, you're getting water from these streams. And in addition to that, they're both high quality brook trout streams. So two of the first emails I got were from Trout Unlimited and the Wildlife Commission brook trout folks, who all wanted to sort of personally give their thanks for protecting those stream corridors because they knew how important they are. And then in addition to those sort of aquatic habitats, the forest habitats on the property are hugely diverse, ranging from really old northern hardwood forests to young forests, including one of the largest American chestnut restoration projects in the country. And those forests of all types are important for rare and declining birds like the golden wing warbler, Canada warbler, tons of forest birds. And I have to say, on a personal note, over coffee this morning, I was trying to envision the numbers of salamanders that must be on this property. And it's literally millions. It's incredible to think about. But in addition to those sort of big swaths of habitat, as Jay also mentioned, we find really small but significant habitats like remnant balds, rocky outcrops that support some of the rarest species in our region, excuse me, including GM radiatum, including Roan mountain bluet. We know there are grazed lily throughout the property. We know rare mammals like long-eared bats, which are federally threatened, use the property. And again, just backing that up to personal experience, the morning this press release went out, I got an email from the wildlife diversity biologists in our region who said they teared up when they saw this announced. I got calls from the inventory biologist for the parks, the state mammologist who wants to look for Allegheny wood rat sites, lichenologists who want to go look and know that there are rare lichen on the property. And funny story, I also in the grocery store this week ran into Alan Smith, who's a retired biology professor from Mars Hill, who 30 years ago did some of the preliminary research to document GM radiatum and to document Roan mountain bluet on the property. And if I could just describe how big his grin was when we were talking about this property. So I think that just speaks well that like all the current experts in the field and also people who have known about this property for 30 years are all incredibly thrilled to have SHC accept this donation. So in short, I'll just say the protection of this property, I think, can make the possibilities of conservation in the Roan and really for research into those rare species unparalleled with anything else that we've done as an organization. And we really look forward to facilitating those partnerships and research and conservation and the impact that that'll have on our region and globally on the conservation of these species. So yay, it's incredible. And with that, I think I want to turn it over to Christy and Pauline for questions.
Thanks so much, Marquette. That really was a great, concise explanation of some of the biological significance of this property and how something being preserved for the future of this scope and magnitude contributes to the kind of the biological integrity of the landscape. I think Christy's going to help kind of facilitate some of the questions and us answering them. And I do see one question about how the property, if the property really is going to help support rural economies of marginalized people. I can take a crack at talking about that, and Christy and Jay and Marquette, y'all may have some thoughts as well. And I mean, I guess I can lead off the discussion and say that an organization like SHC has plays different roles with supporting communities in different ways. And so the question is really focused on working lands, and I guess whether this property is going to contribute to economic vitality for people who who really use lands as working lands. And I think one answer that I have is that SHC does have a very robust program of supporting farmers in the community through various means, and some of which are aimed towards enabling lands that have historically been farmed to remain in that use. So we seek government grants, both federal and state, and then matching private philanthropist dollars to help pay families to enable their farmland to kind of stay as farmland. And so that really endows the future of family farms. And we've done, I think, 4 of those transactions and have additional ones underway in Mitchell County. Now I realize that pertains to families who are affluent enough to have a farm. And so there's questions about people who don't have a farm yet. And so SHC has some really very innovative and vital programs to help people who want to farm but who don't have farmland. And so we have a community farm where we have a heavily subsidized availability of farmland for people to come serve for several years on that before they seek land on their own. And then we have tools to try to help connect people who graduate from that program with farmland. So I don't mean to deflect. It's just that this ecological gem may not be the most appropriate property for us to try to use to support community in that way. I think we do want to, after we receive it, help it be an outdoor classroom for students in the community to learn, maybe develop careers as resource managers or biologists. So I think those are some ways that come to my mind, but want to ask the other panelists if y'all have ideas about how this property can help support the community.
I have one thing I would add is that all of this land is forested and none of it was in agricultural use. One of the interesting things happening on the property that we have committed to continue is a 30,000 acre chestnut research project. So I think Carl made a great point about maybe training future resource managers on this project. We will have ongoing education happening on the property, subject to what the management plan turns up. I would also mention that I think that COVID, the period we've just been through in dealing with the COVID crisis, reminds us of how important it is for people from all walks of life to have access to nature. The place that was most healing, the place that was safest during the pandemic was the great outdoors. And so much, not just of Avery County, but every county in the state is under so much development pressure. And so we have a lot of places that are utilizing land in different ways. We hope that this can be an island of peace and sanity and spiritual and physical healing in the future for the local community, as it has been for a very long time for people for whom this is the backyard. That's very important for us to, we can't provide all services on any given piece of land, but that's something we will place a priority on in this being an important place that will remain as it has been, and that has its own value that's very hard to quantify, obviously. But we keep hearing from people in the southern part of Avery County, please, please help us protect what we're losing of our natural heritage.
Thank you, Carl and Jay. I think I would also add that we will continue doing our outreach work to groups within the communities in both of those counties, school groups, church groups, other groups within the community to provide opportunities for those groups to experience and learn as well.
This is Marquette. I don't have much to add, just on a small scale, so folks know we do always use local folks for all our habitat management, for facilities management, for anything we can. We try to reach out to those local communities and use those businesses so that we're providing some income to some of those folks.
We do have a question, Carl, that you may want to answer in terms of how one would access this property and what of our plans for that.
Thanks, Christy. And thanks for that question. And it does highlight the reminder that SHC doesn't own the land yet. Tim Sweeney owns it, a private individual. And for the coming months, that'll continue to be the case. It's really not going to be till all that due diligence happens that the land is transferred to SHC in spring of 2022, most likely. And so at that time, that's really when SHC undertakes the management planning with stakeholders and partners to think about how we can make the property available. I could imagine that maybe SHC will offer an outing, a guided visit to the property, but I think there'll be very high demand for those visits. And then the visits will need to be kind of guided and structured. So I guess stay tuned in 2022. We'll try to make that available. And appreciate everybody's interest and then kind of understanding that the property isn't owned by us yet.
We've had a few questions regarding access to this recording and this webinar, and we have recorded this and it will be available on our website for other folks to view as well.
Thanks, Christy. Now I understand the question about access may have been for the recording of this webinar, and I
Oh, it may have
misunderstood
been,
it. Thought
yeah.
it was the property being accessed. But we do have a YouTube channel with SHC where we've posted a lot of videos over the last months So anybody who wants to check this out, like Christy said, there'll be various routes to it, but a super way to see a lot of videos about SHC and our work is to go to our YouTube channel.
Yes, Evelyn Block also has another question. What proportion of our holdings of property does this make up? The 7,500 acres.
So we've conserved about 75,000 acres over the years, and so 7,500 more is a mercifully kind of round number.
Yes.
I think it's 10%. Is that about right?
Yep.
Just point out that we don't own all
No,
75,000
we
acres that
don't.
we've protected. A lot of that is conservation easement interests. And
True.
so
But we
we
own
protect
close to
land using different
50,000.
tools.
I think we.
Yeah.
Sorry, Christy, I just saw a really good question in the chat I wanted
Yeah.
to point out. So Joseph Milton asked about landowners who are positively impacted by things like this being near their houses. And truthfully, we've had some really great stories of protecting a piece of land, and we steward that land for a couple years. The neighbors see how well it's managed and how well we take care of it. And we've had at least one person donate their property to us adjacent to that protection. And so I think more of that will happen in the future as more people get familiar with us and what we're doing. But it has some really great benefits and honestly not a lot of drawbacks. So yeah, that's our snowball is definitely gathering more snow. I like that imagery.
I remember the day that the state natural area bill passage was reported in the newspapers, and my phone rang at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was a landowner saying, "Will you buy my land?" And I said, "Well, where is it? Can we look at it?" So yeah, the positive energy that comes from projects like this, these lands, Tim Sweeney started acquiring land in, I think, 2012 with the Pyatt Creek, Jones Creek acquisition, and then neighbors started calling him. His phone rings a lot, as ours does in the office. So whenever there's a good experience with a conservation easement or a land purchase, we're working on Pisgah View State Park right now in Buncombe County, and neighbors to that state park site have now donated land because they're so excited about the opportunity for their land to be protected as part of a place that's going to be treasured for generations. So you asked a good question. That's really how we are successful, is by always performing and always treating landowners with respect, listening to their needs and trying to be a resource for them. And we've been at this long enough in this landscape that we built up a wellspring of trust. And that carries us far as we try to continue to have meaningful impact with places that aren't yet protected, but should be.
Kind of carrying forward, Jay, your note about people wanting to sell their land. There's a note about potentially some folks wanting to sell several hundred acres in Fort Mountain, which is part of the Roan. And so, yes, that is an area where SHC owns several preserves, and we would be interested in trying to learn about the availability of additional land there. So thanks for that heads up. We'll try to track that down. And if you want to reach out to us directly with more information about that parcel, we would appreciate that. So last call for questions. We appreciate everybody joining us for this today. And this is part of our June Jamboree series that we're doing virtually because of the pandemic. Next year, hopefully, we'll be able to meet in person and go hiking together in the Roan. Want to give a shout out for our kind of social and celebration webinar that's going to be tomorrow evening at 5:30. If any of y'all want to register for that, there will be kind of a opportunity to hear from a lot of members of the SHC family, staff, and volunteers and leaders. And there'll be some cool videos that are shared on that, and then awards for people who've helped advance our mission. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and stay tuned. I see a question about whether the social will be recorded, and I think we probably do plan to try to record that and put it up on our YouTube channel as well. So again, thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.